Africa. Welcome to the conference. Thank you to the conference organizer, Sigu, Kindoretta. There's someone else I'm sure I'm missing, but I appreciate this opportunity to speak to everyone. I believe that I have a very important message for the developers of Africa. And as you can see on the screen, I would like for you to know that my name is Joshua Plicque, and I am a drama queen. What that means is over the course of the past year of my life at my company, Or Equals, we're an Elixir and Phoenix Live consultancy. We represented technology for a client with no developers on staff to help sell the company for $25 million. We were doing consulting. It was a project rescue. Development had crawled to a halt, and they literally just needed rescuing, essentially, and they got the request from a bigger company to be acquired. And I was sitting there, and it was a boardroom, and all these people were presenting themselves like, hey, I'm XYZ and I'm CEO, and hey, I'm XYZ and I'm CFO. All other things that we did this year was we launched a complete internal platform with only 3 developers for a company that feeds thousands of people in my hometown of Jacksonville, Florida, manages a fleet of 7 or 8 delivery drivers. We also rescued an e-commerce cannabis coupon company, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to keep going about all these things that we've done. I've only gone through just 3 of them. What's really important about this is that we achieved all these different things that are on this slide. You can read the slide. I'm not going to just read it directly to you. With only 2 to 5 people on staff. Within this past year, we had 2 people, and sometimes we had 5 people. We're at 4 people right now. And the reason why I'm a drama queen is because I am only attracted to game-changing outcomes, like selling your company for 10 figures and completely transforming a local grocery delivery service company with only 3 developers, a company that's doing millions of dollars in revenue, thousands of people are affected. This is the result of productivity. So the reason why I went through these accolades, my name is Joshua Plicque. I'm the CEO of Or Equals, an Elixir and Phoenix Live consultancy. And the reason why those small stories are interesting is because at the end of the day, many developers can hide, but us at Or Equals, we're goons. We're hired guns. If we don't produce, if we don't ship software, we don't stay in business. Like, we don't have the luxury of being able to hide inside of a bureaucracy. We have to go in, guns blazing, and ship value and save people's projects or save people's companies or help them sell their companies. And I've been in the consulting game. So my career has been 8 years long. I've been in the consulting game in particular for probably 5 of those 8 years. And I've kind of discovered that the 2 problems that you pretty much solve for when you're a software consultant is helping a growing company develop their own software to accommodate their new growth. Or more interestingly, you're rescuing a company where software development has ground to a halt. And that second bit, project rescues, is what's interesting to you all today, as the scope of this presentation is what I want to talk about today is being a hero. What would inspire a company to bring in another team that doesn't know their code base, has to navigate the politics of the internal staff clashing with the consultants? The only reason why you would make that decision is if everything has gone wrong. Development has slowed to a halt. And the reason why development can slow to a complete standstill, that you need other people to come in and clean up your code base, not even your own team, is because software development is like being an electrician. When you're an electrician and you wire up a house or a building, all the customer cares about, all the person cares about that's in that home is if the lights come on. That's it. If the lights come on, you did your job as an electrician. But what's funny about that is I've been working in this field for a long time, and most code bases don't look like this junction box that is on your screen right now. Most code bases look like this. Today, I'm talking to you about 3 secrets to developer productivity. The secret that led to our productivity with a team of 2 to 5 developers to achieve all those things that we've done in the past year. Now I'm going to cut to the chase, right? It's a long setup, so let me just stop beating around the bush. I'm going to tell you the secrets right up front. Refactor, test, and never use your mouse. Thank you very much. Sigu, appreciate you guys. That's my keynote. That's how it's done. Cheers. Just kidding. Just kidding. The graybeards in the back, they bristled when they saw that slide. And I'd like to tell you all that my birthday is tomorrow. I'm going to be 32 years old. I have 2 gray hairs in my beard. I'm going gray. My hairline's getting pushed back. So I am amongst you. The graybeards are the older developers, the grizzled veterans. And when you use the word refactoring and testing, those are loaded words for them, because in the industry, when we read software development books, those are the things that are suggested to us. But when it comes down to the real world, those nice junction boxes end up like that messy junction box, because at the end of the day, when it comes to real world software development, no one has time to write tests. No one has time to refactor their code. You mean to tell me that when I have a project manager breathing down my neck, that you want me to write tests to test code that I know works? My code works. You want me to refactor something that I've already shipped it, right? It's like the electrician thing. The lights are on. I'm refactoring. I'm ending up with different code, the same result. And I've got this project manager screaming at, breathing down my neck as to why I'm not nailing my sprint. And that's why the graybeards bristled when I talked about refactoring and testing. But don't forget who's speaking to you. I'm somebody who has opened up 40, 50, 60 different projects in my career, and 95% of them look like this. As I come before you today, ElixirconfAfric, I'm not incentivized to tell you the value of refactoring and testing and never using your mouse, because guess what? I make money when you guys mess up. Why do I bother to tell you about how to fix the problems when I have made a career, I have made a business, I eat off of the mistakes that the industry at large makes? So we have 2 things at play here, which is the graybeards say, why should I test? Why should I refactor if I end up with the same result? And then you have me, someone who is a consultant who comes into these 95% garbage scenarios, and somehow developers that are on my team, we have a culture of making order out of this chaos. So today, we're going to go to church. We're going to be talking about the emotions, the fears, fear, pride, courage, faith, the ingredients of the emotions, the virtues and the vices that lead to the decisions for why a consultant like myself and my company is brought in. So the very first thing that I want to talk about today is pride. One of the most interesting trends that I'm witnessing when I open up code bases is the concept of a stale branch. When you go to GitHub, there's a tab for your branches, and very often when I open up a code base, I see 50, 60, 100 stale branches. What this is is code that didn't get merged into main or master, and it has effectively become stale and is unmergeable at that point. And the reason why this is the case is because of pride. It's because the developers on that team did not ask for help from people in their network, from their lead developer or their boss, and they kind of just put the branch under the rug. And this is a major source of lost productivity time in our field. Let's go back to the beginning of my career when I was a Ruby developer. For 3 years straight, I didn't miss a single meeting of RubyJax. I went to every single meetup. And what's interesting about that meetup is the guy that was running the meetup was a guy named Micah Cooper. Over the course of that 3-year span when I didn't miss a single meeting, at the end of every person's speech, he would ask, hey, is anybody struggling with something? Does anybody have any problems? And no one would say anything. And so it became the Joshua Plicque segment. At the end of every single speech for 3 years straight, I was the only person who would go up, plug in my computer into the laptop, and people would crowd code the problems that I was struggling with. The opposite of pride is humility. And so when I suggest to you to seek help, this is just a very simple thing, but I'm a living representation. Here I am giving a keynote speech today. While that's not necessarily the most humble thing to say, it's because I chose to be a fool one time in my life. I went and I stood up in front of those crowds for 3 years straight, put myself on the line, exposed my problems. I would go to the RubyJax meetups, and I'd have in my laptop, I'd have just post-it note after post-it note, because there was only once a month meetings. I would show up, open up my laptop, and just ask questions to Micah Cooper. I was humble and I was meek. And that is why I have achieved success in this field. And I suggest that to all of you. The greatest sin in the Christian religion is pride. And the reason why a lot of development time is lost when I view these stale branches on GitHub is because people didn't ask for help. And also I have to call out the managers. The managers, at the end of the day, so I'm a big proponent of a concept called extreme ownership. There's a book that you can look up. And at the end of the day, these developers are able to get away with this. It's because they're able to hide. It's either from bad processes in the management pipeline, or you're not holding your team accountable. You don't have the courage to hold your team accountable, or you have negligence and you don't realize that these things are happening under your nose. The solution to pride is humility. So when I mentioned going to RubyJax for 3 years straight and asking Micah questions, no matter what happens. So Micah, at the time of this recording, he's a principal engineer at Salesforce. You know, I'm running or equals, whatever. Who knows what happens? If Micah was a homeless man and came to me tomorrow, Micah is always my superior. No, and that is the source of my success in this field. And it's what I suggest to you all. As you can hear from my story about RubyJax and always asking questions, this is the cure to the pride and the fear that, frankly, permeates through our field. Now I want to move on and I want to talk about testing. Now, testing is interesting because it's counterintuitive as to why it would make you more productive. Because when you write tests, you're writing more code for the same result, which you already have code that works. And you're saying that I have to write more code for the same results? Let's talk through an example. Let's say that you're tasked with creating a filter on a page in a web application. Let's say it's a Phoenix LiveView application. It's a users page. You got a filter where you need to see all the active users, all the inactive users, and all the deleted users or something like that. I would like to tell you guys that I am almost exclusively a Phoenix LiveView developer, and I rarely look at a web browser. And the reason why for that is because you already write tests. And the difference between me and you, the difference between the fact that 95% of apps end up in that hairy condition and me and my team are called in to save the day is because I have certainty that I am solving the problem. When you implement that filter, you go to the browser and you click and you make sure that the users that are inactive, that filter works, and you go and you click and the users that are active. And then what if it expands? If there's soft deleted users, fully deleted users, you don't have the certainty that your code always works because you're always testing. I write tests just like when I was saying before, in terms of pride, I only have to be a fool one time when I go and I ask a question in front of a crowd. Because you refuse to set aside your pride and embrace humility, you are a fool always. You ask the question once, you're a fool once. If you never ask the question, you're a fool forever. Same thing with testing. The reason why testing is counterintuitive is because you're testing things by hand all day. It's a part of your development process. But if you have a test that confirms that the filter does as it does, you have the certainty that your code works and that you've solved the problem. And because the tests run automated, you have certainty in perpetuity. Testing is not optional. And testing is the main reason why I'm running circles around you in this field. So I test once and I know my thing works. You never test, and so you're always testing. The reason why I run circles, that or equals developers run circles around this field, is because we do things differently. And all these things are just the fundamentals. You guys, that's why I showed you the picture of the graybeards. These things are known. These things are obvious. These secrets, they're open secrets. But very few of us actually follow through on these fundamentals. And the fundamentals is the difference between someone who's going to stay productive versus someone who's going to end up locked up by their code base. And ultimately, that leads us to talking about fear. So this is something that an application that I'm working on. I'd like to just show you this code. This is just absurd, frankly. And let's just say you're tasked with needing to make a change to this. Because you don't have tests, you don't have the confidence to refactor. And because you don't have the confidence to refactor, you end up adding to this mess. And then eventually someone like me is called in to come clean it up. Let me tell you about what I learned in college. I studied mechanical engineering at the University of Florida. And let me give you 5 years of engineering education, 5 years of my life in 30 seconds. What I learned in engineering school that is very critical to this craft. The reason why testing and refactoring are more important is because testing and refactoring are the difference between hacking and engineering. The difference between writing tests and refactoring your code and not doing it is the difference between being a professional and being someone who is a hobbyist. So many of us are paid to do this and to write code professionally, but we don't approach it like professionals. You're testing things by hand all the time. You live in fear. I can read it in your code. I've been doing this for 8 years. And when I open up code and I can see a nil check, and then I check all the code paths to that function, there's no way that this function would ever return a nil. Why did you write that? And the reason why is because you live in fear. There's always a ghost behind you, and oh man, like, I don't know if it's gonna work. And because you don't know, you make yourself not responsible. Because you just add to the problem, you don't refactor, you don't have tests, so you don't know. In 5 years of engineering education, in 30 seconds is there's three steps to the engineering process, which is you define the problem, you list your assumptions, and then you determine your solution. Now, that sounds very basic, right? The problem is the field at large always starts with the third step, which is you're given a problem by your product team or your project manager, and you always start at step 3. Let's just go design a solution, but you don't even know what the problem is. The reason why testing is so important is because tests define the problem. The reason why I run circles around all of you is because you're constantly just effectively just, you have no idea what you're doing all day. And you kind of just arrive at something and then you test it to make sure that it works. You have no structure. If you write tests around your code, it limits the universe of what you have to solve. Because but by writing your test, especially test-driven development, I'm not even trying to convince you to do test-driven development, because the industry at large does not refactor and does not test. What a test allows you to do is it constructs and it limits your scope. This field, software development in general, is about the quest for the correct context. When you write a test around something, you have a defined problem scope, so you know what not to think about. When you're trying to demolish a house, there's things that are called load-bearing beams and non-load-bearing beams. A load-bearing beam means that if you take out that beam, this house is going to fall down. A non-load-bearing beam, load meaning that it's taking on weight. If you knock out a non-load-bearing beam, you're good. What tests allow you to do is it allows you to identify what you don't need to care about. It limits your scope to define the problem. And once you have a problem that's defined and you have a test that works for you in perpetuity, instead of you going to the browser to test the filter multiple times, or if you're creating a CSV upload feature and you finish your what you think is working code, and then you got to go to the browser, upload the CSV to your controller, and then you got to go into your database and observe the results, as opposed to if you actually wrote the test, you could just instantly have instant feedback loops of, oh, okay, I broke this part of it. I write the test, you run the test again. It's so fast. Elixir is so fast. What tests allow you to do is they liberate you to refactor. Those broken nil checks that I was talking about, like those random nil checks, oh, but this function will never take a nil. If you write tests, this liberates you to refactor. And there are only 2 rules of refactoring. There's entire books written on refactoring, and they've got 30 or 40 different concepts. The only 2 things you really care about are extract module and extract function. So that ugly code that we were looking at earlier, the way I would go about this, so I was a Boy Scout. And when you're in the Boy Scouts and you're at a campsite, your prerogative, your objective is to leave the campsite better than when you found it. So you camp, you go on hikes, whatever. When you clean up your campsite, you pick up any trash that you found, and you try and make the campsite a little bit better than you found it. That's how you refactor at this scale, as opposed to trying to just, oh, we're going to do a refactor sprint and we're going to spend a month and we're going to clean up the code base. So sometimes that's necessary, right? Because maybe you need to do a big architecture change. I understand that. But code never ends up in this state if you're always, every pull request, making the code better than when you found it. So the way I would fix something like this is I would just extract just one function at a time. Refactoring doesn't have to be this giant monstrosity where you have these guys that are just creating these books. All you need to care about is those 2 concepts. Just extract functions. Now you have a function that you can unit test, right? Now you've got something that you can actually define, fix, and confirm that it's fixed in perpetuity by having tests around it. You don't. Okay, I got lost. I'm sorry, guys. Darn. 5 years of engineering, liberating, 2 rules of refactoring. Right. Craft. The next thing I want to talk about is effectively the craft of what we do in regards to always getting better at it. What we do is something that you can get better at every day. So one of the practical things about our craft is never using your mouse. So say you want to do a documentation lookup. There's a documentation tool called Dash. Dash is something where I can type command space on my keyboard, and I can instantly look up a function like enum.reduce in the Elixir standard API. And so within 5 or 6 keystrokes, I'm already going from my text editor to looking at the documentation for enum.reduce, because I always never forget that it takes 3 parameters. I don't know if, so it's the enumerable, the default accumulator is the second one, and then I think the anonymous function. I never remember off the top of my head. So what takes me probably 2 seconds to do takes most of the industry 15 seconds to do, because you click on Google Chrome, you click on new tab, you type it to Google, you find which result you need to go to. The most practical thing that you can take out of this presentation, say I haven't convinced you to write tests, or I haven't convinced you to refactor, is that if you can try to always use key bindings in Visual Studio Code, or possibly learn Vim. I don't want to necessarily focus on everybody learning Vim, but the most efficient and the best developers I know all use Vim. And I'm going to leave that text editor supremacy to the side, because we could argue that forever. But if you just focus on being more efficient, answering your questions faster by focusing on never using your mouse, that will make you at least, and this is just something I'm coming up with off the top of my head, 15% more productive by default. So the reason why, so I've made the case for why you should be writing tests and why you should be refactoring. And so a big reason why many of you don't write tests is because you are slower when you are a slower developer when you write it. And so when I mentioned that I was going to take you all to church today, I would like for you guys to implement the concept of faith. So all the simple concepts that I presented to you today, most of you have heard of these things before. My encouragement to you is to practice faith. I'm going to just get really close to the camera. And if you end up writing tests and refactoring, I guarantee you that if you stick with it for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks, you will run circles around your previous self. And the reason why is because it's going to slow you down at first. But I guarantee you that by the end of that short period of time relative to a 20 to 30 year career, that you're going to send me a Twitter DM, you're going to send me a LinkedIn message, and you're going to say, Josh, you know what? You were right. There was a time in my life when I was learning Vim. Vim is, of course, a text editor that's in the command line. And there was a good 2 weeks where I lost massive productivity. But on the other side of that 2 weeks is untold gains in productivity. So much so, that's the reason why I started my business. The reason why I started my business is that I had become so productive at programming that I began to resent how fast I was getting things done, and I was only making like a flat salary at a job. That's what's on the other side of this. What I'm asking you to do, when I ask you to write tests and to refactor and to never use your mouse, these things are going to take time. And you're going to be slower at first. When you're trying to do a keybind, you can just click on the folder in Visual Studio Code on the left side, rather than doing Command P and getting to the folder faster. These habits are going to take time, and they're going to be painful at first. But on the other side of that pain is productivity. And that is my message for you today, to reconsider these very fundamental and simple concepts. And if you do them, and if you stick to them, you'll never live and work without them again. Thank you.
We needed
thank you, Siga.
Yeah, we needed an in-person event so that you can get the correct round of applause.
Right.
Single hand on the same. So I always love the enthusiasm that you speak with. I've been very much inspired by your keynote, and I really appreciate it. That was a really well thought, really well presented keynote. And I'm hoping that those listening through actually got a lot of feedback. Shameless plug, I also lost some 3 weeks trying to learn Vim back in 2015.
Okay.
Yeah, and I've never gone
Worth
back.
it? Never. You can't go back.
Yeah.
Also, there's another. I'm sorry, Sigu. There's an unspoken benefit to it. So, what's interesting about the software development is when you're coding in front of somebody that doesn't know software development. So there's a very popular movie in American culture, which is probably popular worldwide. It's called The Matrix, where you see all these numbers falling down the screen, and like when somebody observes you programming in the United States, they're like, "Oh man, you're coding in the Matrix," and that's really like the untrained eye. When you use something like Vim, or even if you're using Visual Studio Code, you can use it in Vim mode, or you can just use all the key bindings. There's a developer on my team who uses Visual Studio Code, but he uses it to a level where when we pair program, like it's just visually impressive. Like when you use keybinds as opposed to using the mouse, it is just visually more interesting and visually more impressive. Like it's legitimately like just a leg up on everybody else. Like you're going to be pair programming with somebody on your team, it's going to be like, whoa, like this dude has really invested in his craft. So that's on the other side of this. On the other side of this pain is a lot of pleasure and years of productivity and years of savings. All right, my bad, Sigu.
Yeah, no worries about that. There's a question on the Q&A. Let me just look it up real quick. Where is the... Oh, Paulette, I've lost it. Are you able to read it through? The question on the Q&A. Awesome.
Yes. So the person asked, developer-driven development, in brackets, testing after implementation. Is this bad practice? Because it still involves testing, yes?
Records? I'm sorry. What? Records-driven development? What was that?
Developer-driven development, which is testing after the implementation. So the person is asking if it's a bad practice.
That's a great question. So you have to. I'm going to answer this from a few different perspectives, which is, I know that the vast majority of the industry doesn't write tests. Right? That's the big part of my presentation. I'm just trying to encourage you to do what you know you should do. So any test is better than no test. The reason why is because you're testing anyway. Whenever you write something, you want to make sure that you're not breaking the code that already exists. And how do you do that? You open up IEX, or you open up the browser and you click something. You're doing tests anyway. So by writing the test, you're automating your process of making sure something works. And it works for you in perpetuity. It makes sure that if you write tests, what you're gonna find is there's gonna be a point in your career where you're gonna make a change that it doesn't seem very interesting, and you're gonna watch tests blow up in some random place in the system. And if you hadn't had tests, you would have been like, oh yeah, I introduced that bug. Yeah, we gotta revert that, my bad. So to answer your question fully, the closer your tests are written to the production code, the more value you're going to get out of them. So testing gives you about 3 to 4 different benefits. Number one, it documents your code for the developers that come after you. Whenever I jump into a new code base, I always go to the test suite first. Of course, most of the time, there's usually nothing there. But every once in a while, there is stuff there. And it helps me. I don't have to read the code. The test, it's documented. Code is read 10 times more times than it is written. And when you have tests, they serve as living documentation. It's living context of what this code is supposed to do. What input is into this function? What am I expecting as an output? Now, with test-driven development, the reason why I would say it's superior, and I would say that's a whole different topic, because I'm just trying to get people to test in general. I would say test-driven development is more productive. And the reason why is because it forces you to consider the context with which you're solving the problem. Remember my engineering school thing, 5 years of engineering school in 30 seconds, define the problem, list your assumptions, develop your solution. When you do your test first, you're defining the problem in advance. So that way you're already limiting the scope of your problem. And so the reason why I have been very productive in my career compared to the industry at large is because I do less than everybody else. I do less work. I do less manual testing. I do less design because the scope of the problems I'm solving is well defined and very small. So I just solve very little problems all day. And because I do small problems all day, I solve more problems all day. And that's why I run circles around the rest of this industry.
All right, that's a great one. Paulette, is there any other question on the Q&A section?
Nope, that was the only question.
All right, thank you so much, Joshua. If I try to summarize what you've said, I'll just spoil everything and I'll just not do it enough favor. We really appreciate your time. Have a good night's sleep. Thank you so much, Joshua.
All right, thank you so much, Sigu.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.